Bonjour, everyone. Hello. Welcome to this talk. I didn't expect so many people. I hope it's as interesting as you might think it is. I started with something very dramatic because I thought, people might be sleeping during the talks, so I wanted to wake you up. So yeah, you will be rugged. So we've heard this a lot of times, right? Everybody's been rugged in DeFi. But this talk is not about getting rugged in DeFi. This talk is about self-sovereign business operations. So what I'm going to talk about is actually that you will be rugged by a bank. Now, we are here to build alternatives to banks, right? And I think it's way less common for most people, especially in the West, to actually be rugged by a bank. Now, for a lot of people, it's happened in crypto, especially because you break some terms and conditions that weren't very clear, right? Maybe you traded with an exchange that they didn't like, or you sent a transaction that wasn't something they expected. So often they'll rug your personal account, right? And this sucks, right? From one day to another, maybe a transaction doesn't come through, your paycheck doesn't come through, whatever. But it's a personal account, you can open multiple, and banks actually have, in most countries, they have to take on new personal customers, right? So it's not a huge issue. It happens, but it's not a huge issue. And nowadays, most of us have personal crypto accounts, right? It's quite common. I guess probably most people in the room here have MetaMask, right? Otherwise, you couldn't get a ticket. So this is actually quite normal, and we're kind of insured, right? Crypto is a hedge against our personal accounts getting rugged. But they'll also, banks, rug your business account. Now, this is way more common than you think. For anyone that has a crypto startup of any kind, a crypto company of any kind, you always get problems with banks. At exchanges, one of the hardest things is securing banking relationships, right? They'll close your banks. You have to have like 4 different accounts in different jurisdictions so that if one fails, you have the other one. But the problem is your bank, right, is the livelihood of your business because you are paying your people, you're paying your suppliers. And ultimately, you want to be able to automate this stuff if you want to scale the business. But when your business account gets rugged, suddenly nothing works anymore. No payroll, no subscriptions, no supplier payouts. Everything is broken from one day to another. Now, this sounds like a hypothetical scenario for probably a lot of you, but this happens a lot for crypto startups. And it sucks. From one day to another, you don't get paid. All your team, nobody gets paid, right? And now suddenly you have to figure out how to redo all these automations. Now, automating your business account is important because really, otherwise, there's no way to scale, right? So trying to fix this is what I think crypto is about, right? Trying to provide people with a way to avoid getting rugged by a third party. So don't worry, we can fix this, right? We fixed it for personal accounts. We've got a lot of facilities now for people to manage their crypto personally. But for businesses, I think there's still a bit of work to do. And it's important to do this because ultimately banks are a single point of failure, right? A bank rugging your business account destroys your business. It completely unsettles you for a few weeks, right? It's a big deal, and it's something that we can't accept, right? We've talked a lot about this stuff, and I think it's time for self-sovereign business operations. So we need to start taking business operations onto the blockchain and start with the same philosophy that has brought us to use crypto in our personal accounts. We have to start using it on our business accounts as well, because these are even more important, right? Individuals are extremely important, obviously, but businesses are the most connected nodes in the economic graph, right? Businesses ultimately are the ones paying people, they're the ones receiving money, they're what makes the economy turn, and we have to bring this on-chain as well. We've talked a lot about these things. I'm sure you've heard these slogans, right? Go bankless, not your keys, not your coins. We talk about this stuff all the time. Like, literally, there's podcasts, there's newsletters that use these terms, right? But they're always talking about retail. And I think we focused enough on retail, right? Now we have a lot of retail attention. Now a lot of people are using crypto every day, but now we have to start focusing on businesses. Businesses are way more important because ultimately businesses will bring a new adoption, right? If we keep focusing on retail, we're always going to focus on the same use cases, which are around investments. But if we start focusing on businesses, we can start onboarding real economic transactions, which is ultimately way more sustainable in the long term than just investments, right? Investments are cyclical. But payments, businesses, they're not cyclical. They're, grocery store doesn't stop in a bear market, right? So we have to start onboarding all those businesses as well. Now, we've seen a lot of startups try to help consumers spend coins. BitPay, all of these companies, they're all checkouts where basically you go, you pay in Bitcoin, you pay in crypto, but they convert it to fiat, right? They convert it to fiat and pay the business in fiat. So what's the point? That does not help adoption at all, because ultimately we already have retail attention. Retail doesn't want to spend the coins, and the businesses are going to liquidate the crypto anyway, right? So it's not what we should be focusing on. We should be focusing on helping businesses actually use crypto in their day-to-day operations. And the only way to do that is to provide a 10x experience, right? This is true with all new tech, with all new habits, right? You're not going to switch because something is marginally better. You're not going to switch because decentralization, right? You're going to switch because the experience is 10 times better. You're going to switch because ultimately you know that what you get is better, right? And it has to be significantly better to get people over the hurdle of changing their business processes, right? And business processes are even stickier than personal habits, right? Because you have a CFO that has to change things, and then they have to onboard everyone in the company. It's much harder. So we have to work much harder to get that business adoption. And that's why a lot of companies aren't focusing on this, right? In crypto, it's much easier to sell Bitcoin through an ATM and make 10% margin than to provide actual business value. So this is a much harder problem. There's way fewer people working on it, but it's a much bigger opportunity, because if we onboard businesses, then there's a huge amount of new avenues for innovation that we haven't even explored yet. So we've got the basic stuff pretty covered, I'd say, custody, accounting, payments. I would argue payments is the one we've done the best, and there's actually a lot of people, even non-crypto companies use crypto for payments when they have to do cross-border things, for example. And obviously we have global, cheap, and instant settlement, which is a huge value prop. On custody and accounting, there's a lot more work to do. Custody is a huge pain. Nobody wants to use a multi-sig. If they do use a multi-sig, it's still painful to use. There's few interfaces. There's a lot of work to do there. And on accounting, ultimately, jurisdiction-specific, taxes, it's a huge pain. So there's a lot of opportunity there for builders to, try and fix these problems properly. But ultimately, this is not enough to run a business, right? This is a very basic business. Making payments, sure. If you're a small company, this is enough. But if you're a bigger company, if you want to scale, and ultimately, we want to scale, right? Then we need a few more things. So first of all, we need recurring payments, right? Recurring payments is the basis of any sustainable business. You have both your incoming payments, your outgoing payments, your subscriptions, your salaries. These are all things that happen continuously, right? And you don't want to be doing those manually, right? That wouldn't allow you to scale as a business. Cash flow advances, this is the concept of basically taking your income and factoring it, right? This is something that is very helpful and useful in businesses to cover liquidity gaps. But again, in crypto, nobody's ever built this, right? Why not? Because nobody's ever built anything for businesses, right? And consumers don't necessarily need these things. Credit lines, there are people talking about credit lines for consumers. And actually, I think people are missing an opportunity here, because providing credit lines for businesses is a lot easier than for consumers, right? Businesses can't run away. Businesses won't care if you dox them because they're businesses, right? They have a public-facing presence. So I think providing credit lines in DeFi is actually a huge opportunity that not many people are looking at. And then insurance, right? Insurance covers everything. It's just a way of making business more secure, right? Whatever risks your business might have, you got to try and insure them. And obviously, people have tried doing this. Actually, Etherisk, I think, was one of the oldest Ethereum-based companies. But there's no market for it because there's no business adoption, right? But the moment business adoption starts hhappening, there's a huge market for insurance. And actually, DeFi is probably the best place to provide insurance, because you can easily pool capital, you can easily, re-insure your insurance. So there's a lot of opportunities in general to provide all of these business services. And here is where I start shilling my project. So we work. We work on recurring payments. We're a company called Superfluid, and we do money streaming. So money streaming is a crypto-native way of doing recurring payments. They happen on-chain, they happen every second. And basically, we move from recurring payments to ongoing payments. So your payments literally happen every single second, which means, on-chain, ultimately, you can build all sorts of, magical things that happen every second. The way it works as a business, right, you could have all your income coming in every second. So, any number of incoming subscriptions or B2B payments or vendor payments. And then outside, you'll pay your employees, you'll pay your B2B suppliers. And this allows you as a business on chain to effectively start, processing those recurring payments in a fairly scalable and efficient way because this is completely automated. Once you start a payment, for example, to an employee, that's it. You don't have to touch that payment again. It will just keep flowing automatically. And what this means is ultimately, with very few interactions with the actual blockchain, you can start automating your business processes, right? Which is what, as we were saying, is what helps you scale and what helps provide those 10x benefits. But I would argue this is still not enough, right? This is enough for crypto-native businesses to start accepting payments, crypto-native businesses to start automating payroll, but it's still not 10 times better, right? This is not enough for retail. Well, retail, it's not enough for normal business adoption. But for that, I do think this helps a lot because ultimately recurring payments and cash flows are the basis for providing credit, right? So once you have on-chain cash flows, right, which you can read, you can verify, you can program, effectively you have a way to start assessing creditworthiness. You have a way to start doing cash flow advances, right, because you have the actual physical cash flow on-chain, which you can start factoring, right? We're building this stuff. It's pretty easy to build. Insurance, we haven't started yet. Obviously, you need a lot more market. But all of these things become possible when you start having on-chain cash flows. So that's what we're working on. Ultimately, what a superfluid stream is just effectively a format for data, which represents an ongoing movement of funds, right? So you can imagine that exactly like a token balance. Instead of a token balance, it's the amount of money moving every second. But you can use that. You can build all these other applications. And hopefully, over time, by pushing really hard on providing the best possible business experience, we can actually start, onboarding real businesses. So yeah, that was my talk. If you're interested, if you want to start using Superfluid, intro.superfluid.finance is a great place. Our Discord is discord.superfluid.finance. If you're a hacker, hack.superfluid.finance. And for anything else, just look for me around. I'm the one with the green t-shirt. Very easy. Yeah, that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Yeah, I generally like the idea of money over time, but when it comes to paying employees and some regulatory legislation, how does it work with like traditional nation states and social security, all these paper contracts? Can we interoperate with Superfluid and all these regulatory regimes, or is it just?
Short answer, no. I mean, ultimately, the legal system is not set up to support money streams, right? But it also wasn't set up to support cars in the 1800s, right? Regulatory regimes change, and we shouldn't allow. Basically, you should never put the regulator in the front seat, right? The regulator is purely trying to make sense of the world that exists, not of the world that could exist. So you should always try and push the boundaries and find ways to make this stuff work. But yeah, I mean, if you ask me, do payment streams fit into the legal system? No, right? But the regulators never heard of this, so how could they regulate for it, right? I think it's a matter of time. We start with where it makes more sense, cross-border, contractor payments, B2B payments, where ultimately you can fix, the amount of money. And then I think over time, regulatory regimes will move as well. It's ultimately just another payment technology, right? There's nothing good or bad about it. And regulatory regimes will simply have to adapt. I often make the joke that accountants hate us because we do this, right? But I think regulators don't hate us simply because they don't know us yet.
Any more questions? Wait, it's for the live stream.
Thanks. For a lot of the business enablement that you talk about, why does it need to be, is the graphic of having it every second, is that just because it looks nice, or does that have an actual, let's say, meaning? Because a lot of the value, for instance, for my business, it runs on a monthly basis or on a 90-day basis. I don't necessarily care about the second-by-second basis, right?
Absolutely. I completely agree. So the trick is that a monthly payment is not, monthly cash flows are not actually a data structure, right? What they are is a series of one-off payments which you observe from the outside and you say, oh, this is always coming from the same person on a regular cadence, so it's a cash flow. but it's not a different data structure. It's just a normal payment, right? The advantage with money streams is that they are actually a data structure, and the payments are settled every second. So the result of this is that you can actually use it on chain as a piece of data, right? And the money is settled until the point where you execute your logic, which ultimately means you can effectively use it in DeFi, right? Well, if you had some sort of on-chain contract that says every month a payment will come, it's, you know, it might come, right? But a money stream, until now, has come, right? Which makes building with it way easier. And ultimately, I think in DeFi, you always want to build things that are composable, right? And month-by-month payments are not composable, right? So one of the biggest things with money streams, and this goes beyond Superfluid, is simply by making the payments more granular, you're reducing the unpayment risk, right? To the smallest unit you reduce it to. So if you pay every second, effectively there's no unpayment risk, right? Which means you can consider the payment settled, and as a result, you know, you can use it much more efficiently.
Super cool. Yeah. And do I understand that correctly then, for instance, that like a lot of the suites that Stripe are building, for instance, like RevShare, you just put that in the data structure and like you don't have to care about it anymore, right?
Absolutely. So if you want to do revenue sharing, you want to, you know, split a fee, you want to split a fee to 100 people, you want to split a fee to an NFT, which then becomes an asset which represents the referrals. People in our community are building all of these things. I think for referrals, it's especially interesting because, you know, you can start creating referral systems for any product that you build very easily. Ultimately, they're just it's just one function to open a stream, and you open it once, and then it flows forever. So you can build a contract that when your client pays your business, you start paying a stream to someone else, right? You can build all these fancy automations on chain, which is why we get excited about, you know, actually building products for businesses that can scale their operations, because we can, for example, build marketing channels straight into the payment line.
Out of time, so thank you very much.